Hi everyone, my name's Nathan and I'm from Drawboard, and with me is Blair Calvert from DKO Architecture. And today we're going to be talking about remote work, especially in the context of what's going on at the moment globally, where lots of teams who may not have worked distributedly before are reevaluating what it looks like to work as a team, given that they have a lot of their team working from home. Obviously, we are particularly interested in architecture and design engineering firms and how they are doing this well. Welcome, Blair. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yep, no, not a problem at all. Glad to be here.
So I guess just straight up, my first question is how's it been for you and DKO? Like, what was the reaction, and at what point did you guys decide to, all right, we need to kick into motion and do something different?
Yeah. It's been a bit of an interesting one. We've got people that have been working from home for a while now, since last year, early this year. It's sort of gradually ramped up as we've had a few people have had need of working from home. We've also got a Ho Chi Minh office, which we've found the interaction between the two offices has needed to be online and digital. Obviously, we can't meet in person. And then a couple of weeks ago, things started to develop very quickly in regards to the whole COVID situation. At which point we decided we would try and pressure test sending half, if not all, of the office home all at once, which was taxing, to say the least.
Yeah.
So we went through, had meetings with directors. We did a 50-50 test. So we basically got our remote working procedures ramped up and across all the staff, which is about 200 odd staff globally. Starting with the Melbourne, Sydney offices, sent half the office home one afternoon and tested all their systems, and then sent the other half home the following afternoon. So fairly accelerated from where we were with sort of half a dozen people who were working from home at any one time. Generally pretty successful. We obviously had a few hiccups trying to get those things rolling as quickly as we could. I think the big thing for us is we already had systems in place. It was just obviously scaling them to be potentially able to have the entire DKO workforce working at home. There was a fear that there'll be a complete lockdown, similar to what's happened in the New Zealand climate, where we would just get 48 hours notice and told that was it and you couldn't go back to the office. So that was probably what drove us to push pretty hard and get everything underway. It hasn't eventuated in New South Wales and Victoria, may still do, we don't know. But it was really about having systems in place. So I think the platforms for us, basically, we've got a remote desktop functionality, so staff can access their work computer from home. And then on top of that, we've used Zoom a fair bit as our kind of primary video conferencing technique. And for any of our, I suppose, markups and interactions and things, we've been using Bullclip pretty extensively. There's been a lot of projects and a lot of users set up in the last couple of weeks. I think the majority of our workforce now are signed up. And we've been using Twist as well, just as I suppose, as a bit of an infill between phone calls and emails, and just a replacement as for the sort of ad hoc chatter you have in the office in regards to, we've got a couple of coffee machine chat threads set up, etc., and amongst all the project threads. So far it's been pretty good. It's been pretty well received. There was definitely some concern about throwing staff who've never worked at home into their home environment and how they would feel about it, and productivity levels to see how people would react and whether people would treat it as a very leisurely approach, or whether they would keep up with the work. We've found that meeting with them regularly on Zoom, and we've used Zoom in conjunction with Bullclip to actively mark up things on screen and replace that kind of side-by-side sketching on yellow trace type environment.
Yeah, so I mean, those water cooler chats, I imagine, are hard to replicate.
Yeah,
because we've had similar We've got a coffee roulette at Drawboard where we each Tuesday, we're doing it more frequently now. People will say, are they available? And then they just get randomly paired, and we have now Zoom chats with everyone. That was something we had already, and that's what we've just taken online. And our Slack channels have increased, and the number of Slack channels we have.
Yeah.
But apart from that banter aspect, which is hard to replicate remotely, from an architectural practice perspective or a process perspective, what's been difficult for you or for DKO in what you can't quite replicate, or you've managed to, but was hard to replicate from the office environment?
Yep. I think that fundamentally the big thing we're kind of missing is quite regularly you'll get the design directors and junior staff, especially around things like competition bids and things that have a very rapid design change, I suppose, method, and the ability to actually sit around, duck off to your computer, print something out, 3D print something, that sort of high-speed design changes where you've got maybe two different design directors having input on it and layers upon layers of yellow trace and coming up with a resolution. Somebody then goes and models that up in ArchiCAD, and then when we kind of go back and relook at the form, and I think that level of interaction is difficult if you're not all in the same room. And as much as we can Zoom that and mark things up in PDF online, it's not quite as fluid. And I think inherently designers like to have pens and paper in hand, and there's just a fluid kind of from your brain onto paper, which if you have to process that through any digital means, regardless of what it is always going to be a little bit slower. And I think that's probably the thing that we've missed from a documentation point of view. Things like shop drawings, we were always going to have to mark up PDFs anyway, and it's a bit more of a more rigorous, slower process in regards to that. That, as far as replicating that in a digital environment, that's been completely seamless. We've cranked out literally thousands of shop drawings in the last few months via online, through Bullclip.
Is there a solution for if you can't have those sporadic conversations that you'd have in the office? Is the solution more process? It's going to be hard to ever remove that, especially we'll find that the design directors are generally very interactive in regards to how they process that. And I think that if we do end up in a lockdown type situation where there's no possibility of contact, it'll just be about everybody virtually gathering around the table. We do, very fortunate in our Melbourne, Sydney offices, we've got some really big touchscreen TVs, one in each office, and you can literally scribble on the TV like a digital whiteboard type scenario. And we've found that's been very beneficial to have effectively an 86-inch tablet. Sounds beneficial.
Yeah, it's been good actually, and I think that's the level of being able to express virtually with pen, but on there, and it's being able to dump stuff in 3D models to a PDF, and then, which is the same process we do normally anyway, that you'll have some sort of go away, come back with a towel that's got a 3D form, and we'll carve bits out of it, we'll relook at the facade, we'll relook at floor plans and things, and that's generally done in a markup sense anyway. So it's just tweaking that process to be able to do it online. The majority of our management team have all got Surface Pros or iPad Pros. They're all have ability to scribble on a screen, I suppose, for lack of a word.
And you're using Bullclip for that?
Yes, yep. So there's I know, obviously Drawboard, which is sort of Bullclip's little brother.
Yep.
And that's on there. So most of our team have got the Surface Pros, which obviously have got some expanded capabilities within Drawboard as well, with the way the palettes and things work.
Yep.
So there's definitely ability to fairly freehand mark up things.
That's great. Okay, so you're working currently with half the team in the office, half of the team at home, and you rotate on a weekly basis.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So I imagine that there's some element of people are having to. I mean, do you have a dedicated desk environment already in your offices, or are people having to get used to having to kind of move desks now, but because of
both?
Yeah.
So what we've done is basically it's been a bit interesting because we've got a component of the office which is probably maybe a quarter-ish working from home permanently as of now. Either they were already, or some of them maybe have health concerns, so they've sort of permanently stayed at home.
Yeah.
And we've actually done a bunch of desk moves to make sure that when the 50-50 swap over happens and things, no one's sitting near anybody. So we've got sort of 1 or 2 desk spacing between each person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's worked out well. So we're distancing pretty well in the offices at the moment. But we typically would sit people in teams, like we usually have our interiors team generally in the same vicinity. Just purely because it's if you're working with somebody, if they're sitting next to you, you can just kind of lean over and go, what do you think about this? Have a look at my screen type thing.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to reshuffle that a little bit. There's been a fair bit of thinking about how we split the 50-50 work from home alternating thing. Originally, we just went through and said, listen, let's just do alternating chairs, and we realised that probably wasn't going to work. The other thing we had to keep in mind was, if we do have a confirmed infection in the office, then obviously that team would then be all go home, self-isolate for 2 weeks with that. And what we didn't want to do was have each project team in the same group A, group B, which would mean that potentially if there's any issues with working from home, the entire project team all working from home. So we've kind of split things up. There's been a huge amount of thought and many markups right now, and it's changed a few times, but we've found that at the moment it seems to be working really well. We've really imposed upon the associates and the team leaders to lead their teams and be, I suppose, across the communications. So we've got scheduled team catch-ups with the directors, and there's that many ad hoc Zooms and things going through that it's there's been a few comments that we've been doing probably too many meetings on the basis that because we can't wander past each other and talk about something that there's a few more. But it's been important just to make sure everybody's feeling connected, because if you're not used to working at home, if you live in a studio apartment in a town, it can feel pretty lonely. Having contact when you're used to being in an office of sort of 90 to 100 people on the floor. So
yeah, absolutely. So that brings me to my next kind of thing, is that you're a large firm, and you are a multinational firm, as well as multiple offices in Australia. What advice would you have to an architectural practice who is not at your scale, or doesn't have the resources that you have, to adjusting to a time like this?
Having a good IT support crew. Our external IT supplier, Bergen CT, have absolutely bent over backwards to ramp up to do what we needed them to do. As we had the systems in place, but obviously then to scale it up to making it available to all staff members across different networks and across different platforms as well, Mac versus PC. So there's been, they've put in a bucket load of hours to try and get us across the line on this. It's been pretty taxing. But
so have someone else do that part for you rather than trying to do it all yourself? Is that
absolutely. If we're lucky, we've got IT experts. So my IT work in the office is generally putting band-aids on stuff, fixing that. But that there. So I think if you've got the facility to do it, it's well worth paying somebody who's got expertise to set it up for you. Take care of that, because once it's running, it's running. I think that was the primary thing. Also, just keeping your eyes and ears open. There's a million different platforms for various things out there. Ask around. As architects, we don't tend to communicate between ourselves as well as we should do. There's the whole what if I'm letting secrets out type thing. Just send an email and ask what other people are doing. I think that the general kind of everybody's helping everybody. And when you see the trade unions and government all on the same page trying to get things working, it's not something we've seen before. It seems to be everybody's pitching in to help each other rather than competing against each other, which has been quite heartening to see.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. What about from a priority perspective? Obviously, there's a lot that happens in the office that you want to try to replicate when people are working from home. What should people focus on first?
We've definitely looked at what our outputs are. We still, despite working from home 50-50 and potentially 100%, meeting all our deadlines. And you kind of work back from there that we needed to make sure that productivity stays up, because at the end of the day, we're still engaged to perform a service as architects. We need to meet those. Obviously, if we don't meet those, then that could negatively impact our billing. That's obviously very important because the money needs to flow. But I think from that, it was looking at what we need to do to keep as productive as possible. The other major consideration we had, and we've ended up on the remote desktop system that we're running now, on the basis that we didn't want to impose too much on the staff. We set the low for what they need at their end. Large CAD programs, whether it's Revit or ArcCAD or MicroStation, generally require a pretty decent piece of kit to run, and we don't expect that our staff will have a $4,000 PC sitting at home just waiting to fire up. So we've gone with a remote desktop thing. The other consideration is data security. Not having people's personal computers linking to our network is an absolute key factor, because we can't control that. And given our network is global, the capacity for somebody's home computer to infect multiple areas of our network would be disastrous. So we primarily just don't allow that to happen.
So there are some industries which are going to be impacted pretty heavily over the next 6 to 12 months, namely tourism, hospitality, all the in-person industries, really. There are some like ours, so software, which is not going to be as adversely impacted.
Positively, I would suggest.
And in some ways positively, because we do do remote work software, which is great. What do you foresee in terms of the architecture industry, at least in Australia? What's the landscape going to look like over the next 6 to 12 months?
There's definitely some nervousness around what that'll mean. I think our primary sort of concern is if there's a big shutdown, obviously the builders shut down, we'll find that we don't have work to do at that point, which obviously then leads to the whole how do we keep trading if we don't have customers who are paying our bills type thing. And that's not just architecture, that's any industry in total. So there's definitely some nervousness around that. We can only, it seems to have eased off a little bit now, but it was changing and felt like an hourly basis over the last couple of weeks. With that, we've tried to take a fairly prudent approach as to how that works. I think generally, as my personal opinion and shared by anecdotally a few other people just around the traps, is that it does appear that with the slow incremental shutdowns and lockdowns and things will suffice. New Zealand's obviously gone with a 4-week lockdown period where they've just basically said nothing happens for the next 4 weeks. The risk is that in Australia, if they do that in the construction industry, everything that surrounds the construction industry stops. All the suppliers, all I suppose consultancy, upfront team, all the construction guys, the unemployment queue will blossom hugely if that happens. So I think the nervousness was around that. We don't know really. I don't think anyone knows really what the next couple of months hold. The hope is that if the infection rates slow down and we flatten the curve, which is the common sort of terminology there, the healthcare system has enough capacity to keep up with everything, that then there can be some continuance of trade. And at which point then basically we still have work to do. Our customers will still keep paying their bills, and we'll continue onwards. I know from our point of view, we're certainly no less busy than we were a month ago. We still have a huge amount of work to get done. So hence back to the whole, what can we do to make sure all the staff are as productive as possible? Because we still have a huge volume of work to get done. That can't be done unless people are actively working on jobs.
Of course. Have you given any sort of tips or any guidances to your staff on how to be productive at home?
Yeah, actually, there's been a number of that. We've pushed pretty hard, as I said, the team leaders and associates to make sure that they're leading their teams, as they do in the office anyway, but to probably ramp up to make sure they're checking in, and not so much just checking in to say, have you done all the things yet? It's really just checking in to see how you're going. A big component of our discussions with staff being around mental health as well, which if you've been in an office of sort of any number, but for us, sort of 50, 90 people, wherever you are, and then having to work from home, it's a really fundamental shift in how you deal with your day. And it's interesting because some people will respond not as well. A lot of people will respond by struggling with the boundary between work and home, where you're actually logging in earlier and leaving the computer on till later, and struggling to find that boundary between, I should probably just get this done, hang on, it's 8:30 at night. So there's definitely been some guidance in regards to that, and a lot of focus on mental health and making sure that our staff are aware that if they need help, they just need to ask. There's a huge amount of resources out there as well. Beyond Blue have now got a specific COVID kind of isolation thing that they've had a huge ramp up in calls, but it's about that awareness to make sure that we're looking after our staff and that they're comfortable working from home, because I think that's, if they're happy and comfortable working from home, the productivity will follow.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So in terms of just to wrap things up, I'd be really keen to hear how you're using Bullclip, what that process looks like in terms of, especially what it was, what your normal operating mode of operating was, and I guess then how that's changed and what it is now. So what does step me through what a design review process would look like with Bullclip as a component?
From a design point of view, generally there's anywhere from, we CAD pretty early because we're using ArchiCAD. It's all 3D, massing pretty early on in the piece, and just massing and trying to work out floor plates. Obviously, all coincide, it's all in the same model, and reviewing that, just even if it's just cubes and a streetscape, trying to understand that. The typical work process is we'll do that, we'll print it out in some A3s in colour, the design director will look at stuff, we'll go through. We don't have a strong hierarchy in that regards. We've got very much got an ethos of the best idea wins. So quite often you'll find that a grad will come in and come up with a fantastic idea, and we'll take that on board. We don't have the hierarchy where unless you're in the right position, you can't have the right idea. I think it's the way of putting it. So quite often they'll present back, and then there'll be sketches over the top of those to come back, say, listen, can you redo the balconies like this, or we want to look at curving this to the facade, or we need to throw some more articulation. That process all happens within PDFs getting uploaded, people drawing over the top of it. Quite regularly we'll either have a phone call or a Zoom over the top of that and say, here's what I'm showing you on screen, can we do a bit of work over here? Because it's obviously a real-time or close to markup. So from a design point of view, that's probably replaced the in-person side. From a documentation point of view, it's I suppose quite a traditional workflow where the lead architect or associate will ask for a package of work, so a concrete set of plans to be done. The person who's doing the work will then do them, publish them up, and then sort of, I suppose, put them up for approval, for lack of a better word. And then we'll go through, the project architect will either sign them off or mark them up and say, can you make these changes? We've had that system in place for quite a while for remote office working. So Melbourne, Sydney, Auckland, Ho Chi Minh all do components of each other's work, just depending on where the workforce is available. the Sydney office are quiet, they'll pick up some Melbourne work. If the Ho Chi Minh office are quiet, they'll pick up some Sydney work. We try and share it around a fair bit. So we've got a system in there which literally replicates the old school, mark things up in red, put your notes in blue, and then the person who's doing work will just run the highlighter over to say, these are all the things I've completed, here's the new revision of the documents. And we've been doing that for quite some time. Obviously, the breadth of what we're doing now has expanded substantially across the board, and just the sheer volume of people who are engaged in like build projects at the moment, gone up a fair bit.
That's great. And so if you were to, if you sum up the value that Booklet's been able to bring to the team, how would you kind of sum it up in a couple of sentences for people who are watching?
I think the fairly instant interaction between remote users has been an absolute boon for what we do. That for us has been the major thing. It's twofold. It's interactive display, being able to talk somebody through as you mark up a document, and also not having to print out shop drawings, manually mark them up, scan them back in and things. That's which in a remote capacity, nobody's got a printer at home that'll print out 200 shop drawings at a time. That's taken that whole paper archaic way of doing things out, and it's all online now. I think those are the two primary things that we've gained from using the software.
That's great, awesome, and it's great to hear that Booklet's able to kind of enable you guys to do not just replicate what you've had, but to improve and take things to the next level. So that's really awesome. Awesome. And look, is there anything else you wanted to add in terms for people who are watching, who are kind of looking how to do remote work themselves, or any advice to firms as they move through this next few months even?
Yeah, it could well be. Regardless of where you are in the world, I think that's it. Ho Chi Minh just announced yesterday that they're locking down the city to effectively almost New Zealand level type thing. That's fairly short notice. I think keep your eyes and ears open is probably the primary thing. There's a lot of solutions out there. They've just got to pick the best one that's available. But listen to the feedback. It doesn't take you long to go online or anywhere to get a feel for what's working for people and what's not, and dive in. You guys are offering, I think, this is free 3 months at the moment, which
that's right.
Get in, test it, get it working and things. That's an absolute boon, because you might find that in 3 months' time, you're so au fait with it that you'll keep all of your licenses on, or some of your licenses on, don't know. But you need to just find means of doing that and making sure you're communicating actively with the staff, because if you keep the communication going, everything else will fall into place. You can make it work.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure, Blair. Thank you so much for your time, taking it out of a very busy home day. So thank you so much.
Yes.
And I'll chat to you soon.